Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you. Minister, you made reference to the level of consultation that's being done. And it's been put to me by the dairy industry in particular in Victoria that they've kept turning up to engagement opportunities, but they're never heard because they're in the wrong part of the basin and they're not members of the Greens political party. They live in the basin and they want to be part of the solution. The best decisions can be made when you make use of people that are closest to the situation. But the level of frustration and fatigue in these communities at being silenced and being, shall we say, compliantly listened to but not actually heard, because everything they've been saying is falling on deaf ears. Because what I hear this morning is that those socioeconomic protections are being removed, and I'm able to assist the minister thanks to an FOI document from the Victorian government, so I can't believe that this hasn't been fed into the federal government, but that milk production is likely to be 33% lower than without the Basin Plan. That's a third, a drop in milk production as a result of the decisions we're making here. So if the Victorian government has done the modelling on the economic impacts, why don't you know the answers to my very simple questions?
Minister.
Senator Mackenzie, I've stepped through now about 3 times the policy process the government is working through. I've indicated the advice that we will draw upon in finalising arrangements for water recovery, including any voluntary buybacks. I don't have anything to add to my previous answers.
Senator Mackenzie.
Senator, that you've been sent into the chamber to effectively offer a fig leaf of assurance to the 2 million of us that live in the basin and the mighty industries that we represent and that feed not only our own nation but the globe, with such a glib response. And it says to me that the minister's staff that are sitting here in advisor's box are doing you a disservice, because they should have come to this place with the answers to what are incredibly basic questions, and that my home state, thanks to — never thought I'd say this — thanks to the Labor Party in Victoria, have actually done the work. And that's why the Labor Party in Victoria does not support your changes, because they've done the social and economic impact, and they understand what it will do. Families will lose employed parents. Processors, already on thin margins, will be closed, and primary producers are going to go to the wall. Not that it matters the Labor Party, not that it matters to Tanya Plibersek. She's got a bigger prize in mind. And it's not caring for rural and regional communities, the dairy industry, the horticulture industry. It's chasing down Anthony Albanese and seeking votes in a future leadership contest. And that actually—
Minister. Senator Mackenzie. Minister.
This is a point of order about imputations. I've allowed Senator Mackenzie to make a range of observations about government ministers without interruption.
Point of order.
But it is a point of order, yes.
Senator Mackenzie, would you care to withdraw with regards to motivation?
I withdraw if it assists the chamber.
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie.
So, being focused on where Labor Party voters live and vote, rather than where food is produced, and, dare I say it, people that vote for the National Party and care about a productive, sustainable and prosperous agriculture industry, seems to be the motivation behind the bill before us. And a little bit of differentiation from Tony Burke, I might add. She's gone tougher and harder. So I am concerned, Senator, that you are here doing the dirty work, shall we say, on behalf of a minister who hasn't bothered to understand the social and economic impacts. If I can see, the advisors aren't giving you any assistance with the actual data that I know they have. because Basin states have it and will have passed it on. And if they haven't passed it on, it's because the minister hasn't been bothered to ask. And that is not impugning her motives. It is actually explaining her very clear motives, because she doesn't care about the social and economic impacts of this bill on our people. And that is why this week we've had Deniliquin and Shepparton, but the Goulburn Valley took to the streets in Shepparton to protest against this government's decision to rip away their very livelihoods. Convoys up and down Shepparton, but I would argue Basin primary producers need to bring that convoy to Canberra, be a little more French, be a little more Dutch, shut down the federal government, because we're a little bit out of sight, out of mind for the Labor Party. If you don't live in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane, this government doesn't give a stuff about your future or your family's future. And I think it's abhorrent. There's a lot of very, very emotional people, particularly in my home state at the moment, because we know what it will mean, and it will hang around your neck. And I hope every single time you hear of a job loss, you hear of the mental health impacts, you hear about children, social dislocation, I hope every time you hear that, you understand that you did this to facilitate your ideological bent for Sydney and Melbourne votes, and I dare say Adelaide, with the deal with the Greens. This is a major rewrite of the plan, and while Labor and the Greens, and I hear Senator Pocock now, may have shown utter contempt to those who live in the regions, I am not ashamed. As much as the government ministers and senators come in here and try and shame me and my political party for standing up for rural and regional communities, we take that as a badge of honour, because we know you actually don't give a stuff. We won't take a backward step in trying to protect our towns, our industries and our regions. And this bill goes directly against the bipartisan spirit which the former Labor government actually constructed the Basin Plan when Tony Burke worked with the Basin Ministerial Council. Instead of telling Victoria to get stuffed, which this Labor federal minister has done to her own state Labor water minister, Minister Burke actually worked with Basin states and said it could only be delivered if it didn't negatively impact people. If federal Labor was serious about creating good water policy, they would amend this bill. They'd remove the 450 gigalitre of upwater. They'd remove the need for buybacks. They'd enable new offset projects, and no further water would be taken until the Basin Plan concludes in 2024. Imposing water targets at any cost with a natural river system is crazy. It ignores the science that we now have and neglects the fact that this is a natural river system. It's not a set of pipes you can just connect to each other. There's things called natural constraints. And having been at the Barmer Choke and understood that that particular environmental asset is being degraded by the way the recovered water is being managed instead of enhanced, shows you we have the science now. Let's use that instead of beating basin communities over the head time and time again with the blunt instrument of gigalitres of volume. So-called environmentalists, who are really lefty activists, have campaigned for water targets that have now been rubbished by the scientists. And it's a pity we haven't heard enough from the scientists in this debate, because in Senate inquiries we are able to get scientists in front of us and actually prosecute these ideas, and they make it very, very clear. We know more now than we did 10 years ago when this Basin Plan was arrived at. We know how to use the water in a much more sophisticated way, because we're actually measuring in a way that we hadn't before. As Alan Moran puts in The Spectator Australia, there is no serious soil or water salinisation in Australia other than that which occurs naturally. Moreover, it is ludicrous to suggest that farming is causing soil stress when both farm productivity and farm output has increased steadily for 2 centuries. The bottom line is that in pursuit of vastly overstated environmental gains at least 16% of Basin's water that was previously used for irrigation is no longer available, and a further 6% is now being sought. Frontier Economics, I can help you out again, Assistant Minister, has estimated the latter would mean $513 million a year loss in gross agricultural product. By severely reducing the productivity of the land, the existing plan will therefore wipe out some $2 billion a year in the form of losses in agriculture output incurred by farmers, their employees, their contractors, their customers. And for those in capital city that want to, scoff and laugh at big irrigators, that is just a faux political argument about mums and dads, kids at primary schools, footy clubs, netball clubs that are going to go to the wall because you are chasing a volumetric outcome that won't even deliver you necessarily the environmental outcomes you seek. And so they rightfully, through us, come here and expect some answers. Have you done your homework? Do you know how many job losses there are going to be? Do you know what the economic impact will be? And what I've sat here and listened today is you haven't. Minister Plibersek has been derelict in her duty. And I never thought I'd say well done, Tony Burke, but I am, because at least he worked with Basin communities. This minister, and I'll say it again, has been more interested in chasing down Anthony Albanese and Labor Party leadership votes in the future than she has by standing up for the communities she represents, using the best science so we have a healthy river, healthy environmental assets and healthy, sustainable communities. You've done a dirty deal. The Victorian Farmers Federation calls you out. The National Farmers Federation calls you out. Local governments up and down the Basin call you out. And the National Party and the Liberal Party call you out. And we will be watching the devastating impacts of your ideological pursuit, and I hope you wear every single one of them, because it is unconscionable what you are doing to Basin communities today.